Thank you very much for joining us for this first SKBC webinar. This first session today will be focusing on how Swiss companies in Korea are adapting and operating their business during this difficult time. We have with us today 4 Swiss company CEOs. They will share with us their views on the current situation, including their plans and policies to get the best out of this crisis. And finally, they will share with us how the Covid-19 has impacted so far their business. I would like to welcome today Erwan Vilfeu, SKBC Chairman and President of Zuellig Pharma. Thank you for joining us for this session. Mr. Alain Diller, CEO of Swatch Group Korea. Also, Mr. Sutton, CEO of Schindler Elevator. And probably please joining us, Mr. Hyeon, Country Manager of Givaudan. So we will start immediately with a small presentation to kick off the meeting made by Erwan Vilfeu. I will share my screen.
Yes, thank you, Frederic, and good morning, everybody. You can hear me clear?
Yes, very well.
Great. So I put up a few slides from different sources, and probably many of you have seen some of these informations. I'm sure you got too many informations coming up, but just to put everybody at the same level before taking 10-20 minutes, and then we're going to get through the different panelists to try to understand how they're coping with the crisis. If you want to move on to the next slide, Frederic. So I started updating the number of cases as of this morning, which you have on the right of your screen. We had this morning 375,000 cases, 16,000 deaths, which is a sharp increase compared to yesterday, which was 336,000 cases. And you can see on the slides on the bottom how the growth, whether you look at it in linear or logarithmic, it's growing very, very sharply. Go on to the next slide, please, Frederic. The growth is coming from multiple countries. We see now that the top 4 countries behind China are all growing by more than 4,000 new cases per day. We've also, one of the fast acceleration is coming from United States with 9,000 cases as of yesterday. So it's quite impressive to see how all these countries are accelerating. Good news for Korea, we're back to 64 cases. As you've seen in the past days, Saturday we were over again on a triple-digit number. We're back to a lower number, and stabilizing below 9,000 cases. Switzerland is also increasing quite fast. Looking at the size of the population, 1,000 cases puts us at the same level as Italy in terms of number of cases and acceleration. So it's quite serious as well for Switzerland. If you take the next slide, Frederic. I was also comparing Switzerland and Korea, looking at where the 2 countries are standing in the crisis, and obviously we see that South Korea has been stabilizing quite a lot, while Switzerland is just at the beginning of the crisis, like most of the countries in the top 10. So, next slide. So next slide, Frederic, please. The next, we'll share with you the presentation so you can refer to the slides afterwards. This is a few slides I picked as well from McKinsey presentation, which was explaining where we stand with the COVID-19 compared to a lot of other diseases. So it's quite interesting to compare based on the reproduction numbers and the case fatality compared to a lot of other disease. Now, one of the issues is, I mean, definitely it's more dangerous than the flu. A lot of people were not taking the disease very seriously at the beginning, saying flu is more damaging. One of the fundamental difference we talked a lot about in Pharma is the fact that it's a new virus. We don't know much about it, so that's why we're very comfortable with this crisis. But for sure, one thing which is important is to understand that these are numbers which are related only to official numbers from the government. So if you look at the number of tests as displayed on the screen now, we see that it's quite interesting to see how countries are testing their population. And so Korea has been praised in the media for a very high number of tests. We got close to 320,000 tests now as of March 20. Germany is not doing bad in Russia, but you see a lot of other countries are extremely low in terms of number of tests performed on the population. So probably one of the good reasons why Korea has been efficient has been a very high tracking of the population and of people contaminated and very high level of tests. And if you try to make some ratio, I made some ratio on the right. If you look at the numbers of people tested versus the number of people contaminated, you see there's a very big difference. So we can probably think that the real number of cases in many of the other countries we've seen before in the list, many of the cases are much higher than what is really displayed officially, because a lot of people are not being tested right now. Next slides. I picked a few slides also from KBC that made a good presentation with Tony Michels explaining a bit what could be the impact of the virus on the economy for Korea. Again, you look at the slides when you get the presentation if you want to read all the details, but definitely what Tony was highlighting is the fact that you have a sharp slowdown in terms of oil imports, which is a good measurement of the slowdown in the economy. And they have multiple scenarios now from the Bank of Korea that shows a very sharp decrease of the GDP growth for 2020, losing 1 to 1.6 points of growth. If you go to the next slide, I think another way to see the economic growth, I took these two pictures. One was Saturday or Sunday. The other one was a few weeks ago. And maybe a lot of people can enjoy the fact pollution is going down. But it was quite weird to me to see that the sky was extremely blue and there was no plane trail in the sky, which shows that really something is happening, and it's like the world stopped and the economy stopped. So less pollution, less planes in the skies, and definitely we're slowing down in terms of economy. Next slide, please. The government, as you may have read, is trying also to see what kind of measures they can put forward to help the economy. The government promised 11.7 trillion won supplementary budget proposals. Mole is also trying to find some ways to help the industry. They're also looking at how to help the tourism industry, which is very heavily impacted. We discussed with our panelists to see on their sides who is impacted. Alain can probably share also some very deep impact on the luxury business. Today, the government is looking at the tourism industry. Next slide. Also, many companies seems to be also very vulnerable. We know that Hyeon, the fifth largest remaining shipping line, moved into grid control in early March. A lot of companies are facing very high difficulties in terms of cash. Big group like Doosan, Asiana, Engine, all the traditional trade, modern trade retailers or department stores are also suffering big time. And that's without saying that a lot of small and middle industry, also enterprise, are also suffering a lot from a sharp decrease of their revenue and problem of cash. The next slide. So coming back to another presentation of McKinsey, it's also interesting to look a bit forward and trying to understand how long this is going to last. At a worldwide levels, there are different scenarios looking at what they call delayed recovery and prolonged contractions, and both scenarios are looking at quite a high impact in terms of economics for quite a long term. Again, you read through the slides. I want to move fast just to allow some the panelists to talk afterwards. So if you want to go to the next slides, take the next one, please, Frederic. Next slide.
Next one.
Yes, that's slide again from KBC, where Tony was trying to see for the different countries how long the crisis is going to last. And for sure, what we understand now that it's not going to be only short term. Looking at how many other countries are having a delayed acceleration, we're not sure how the virus is going to behave when the summer is coming. But definitely we can forecast an impact on the economies that's going to last probably until beginning and mid of next year. We've also for Korea, although we have stabilization of number of cases, we're probably going to have some impacts in terms of supply, in terms of restrictions for people moving in and out of Korea, which will definitely impact the economy. If you want to move on, Frederic, next slide is actually talking about the fact 140 countries are imposing territory bans for people coming from Korea. I think they have implemented now in Incheon, when you arrive, people apparently are being transported to a nearby test center by on bus, and you have to stay 24 hours before being able to enter Korea. So as we've seen in China, Korea is now also putting very strict measures to prevent people to contaminate, to bring back the coronavirus into Korea. The next slides are slides from a presentation you've probably seen as well, which is coming from the Mercer survey, looking at how companies have been monitoring or reacting, and that's going to be a topic we're going to talk about. We see that a few companies said they had closed down some offices or plants. Most of them, 51%, is still monitoring and trying to understand how the situation is going to evolve. But definitely they took some measures to protect the health of their employees, like working from home, which is, we can discuss about that afterward, altering the way people have been working until now. The next slide is actually showing the measures that were taken by most of the company, like canceling the business travels, working from home, putting some employees in self-quarantine, body check temperatures, etc. And the next slide is, I think we can move on in the presentation because you have just 3 slides, but I would just not comment, and we can send to you, which are some examples of how to react to the crisis, and also how the COVID-19 is also putting more pressure on the healthcare structure. So I propose to stop now and hear from our panelists how they are reacting with the crisis. Again, you'll get these presentations, and you probably had many of these slides from the presentation from McKinsey or from KBC or from Mercer. If you did not, we can send the full presentation afterwards. So let's move and try to understand from our panelists how things are going. Maybe we can start with Alain, if you want to share with us what measure you took with your employees to withstand the crisis. Alain, is still here?
Hello?
Sean, I see you here. Maybe you want to share with us on your side for Schindler how things are going.
Sure. Thanks, Erwan. Yeah, I think we lost audio from you, Alain. But maybe I can start. Hopefully you can hear me. Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Good. All right. So back in January, I think, we, following the China increase in infections, we formed a crisis management team here in the Schindler organization. So it's essentially the management team members along with our health and safety manager, and that team was meeting regularly to monitor the situation. Also, we formed a control tower. So within the crisis management team, we had the HR director and our health and safety manager were the key points of contact for monitoring externally and internally across the organization as events unfolded. So I think that was the initial response. And that team was also responsible for issuing guidelines, bulletins, newsletters, and these are typically a combination of the government updates and guidance that were coming through, as well as the company guidelines. So there were a few, I guess, some of the policy decisions made were around travel very early. We restricted travel across province boundaries because our organisation is national and we have service people out in the field. We did limit them to within their own provincial areas. So that was part of the initial response. I think another challenge for us was around the PPE, the personal protective equipment, and particularly we saw the run on hand sanitisation and masks, and this also provided somewhat of a challenge for us. But I think with the new government measures on the mask controls, at least supply is continuing. So I think that's something.
Sean, what is the percentage of your business which is into maintenance compared to new construction, and how did you make sure you could keep your employees to ensure the maintenance of the elevators?
Yeah, so it's over 65% is service business. So we have about 240 employees working in the field providing maintenance. Maintenance is mandatory on a monthly basis. So we did have challenges, and what we're seeing now is as the government using their control, contact tracing and GPS tracking for COVID patients, we see increasingly buildings being closed for disinfecting. So this has been one of the challenges, that we couldn't actually access buildings to perform the maintenance because of closure for disinfection.
Thank you. Alain, are you back with us? Maybe Frederic can try to.
Doesn't seem like.
To see if he's still around.
Yeah. I can welcome Mr. Kang. Mr. Kang, join us. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm very sorry, a bit late. I have a bit technical problem to join, but I'm luckily joined. Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Nice to have you with us, Mr. Kang. Maybe you can, now that we see you on the screen, maybe you can try to tell us how things are going for Givaudan and how you've been coping with your employees.
Yeah, we are on the same line with the Korean government, also WHO. So we actually start the crisis management from the end of the February. Actually, personally, I was in Europe in the end of the last week of February when the situation is very serious in Korea. But at that time, I visited in the Northern, in the Amsterdam. But at the time, the people in Europe doesn't really care that the situation. But at that period of time, in Givaudan, we started very seriously crisis management, and also we starting the flexible working hour. We start from 10 to 4 and work from home and shift work, and we'll continue this kind of the system. And also the same, like all the travel is banned. And also we are doing for the weekly updates to the team to new guidelines to the employees. But so far in our company is not really impact. For the situation is not so far is safe.
I see.
Okay, great. Thank you. Do we have Alain back online? Or?
Alain seems to be back, yes. Can you hear us? Oh, yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, very well.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we hear you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I had to come in again. So you can hear me now?
Yeah. If you want to tell us
all right, thank you.
how Swatch is coping with the crisis.
Yes. So, yeah, maybe just in short an introduction to the company so that people understand in which sector we are active. So we are a distribution company distributing the Swatch Group brands in the Korean market. The Korean market for us is three-folded: the duty-free market, tourist, and Ervan was telling us the high impact, negative impact we have on the tourist industry. And the other market, of course, is the local market. We are at the front in the retail. We are of course, we have office and we have warehouse and logistic operations, as well as a customer service operation. And all of these areas have a little bit of a different setup. So when it comes to security of people, and we made a motto which was maintaining a high security level in our premises, as well as making sure that we have a continuity in the business operation. So when it comes for security of the people in the retail, we have about 400 people in retail operation, both in duty-free and in local business. And of course, there we are depending on the decisions that are made by the retailers, the Lotte, Shinsegae, Schindler in duty-free. So we follow their guidance, backed up by government guidance, and basically there we saw hours reduction, working hours reduction. And that led to us to minimize or reduce rosters and to give 1 day free per staff. And we pay that day. So basically the staff can take an additional day leave per week, and we pay that day. In the offices, we did a little bit differently. We work basically with home office, but we work in 2 shifts. So basically, I can come the day 1, and my colleague will come the next day, and so on. On Friday, basically we close and we make home office for everybody. And this is interesting also to see. This crisis helps to understand how a company can actually try to operate without being together and reducing the physical communication. Actually, it's quite a challenge and quite a learning. To maintain a warehouse operation and customer service operation, we have a slightly different approach. Actually, we work also with 2 shifts, but basically everybody is going to work. We make 1 shift in the morning and 1 shift in the afternoon, and these shifts are not seeing each other. The attempt here is to really reduce the presence, the number of people at a given time in the premises. And of course, as you know, you cannot have home activity for warehouse people or for customer service operations. So these people have to come on the spot. Then we have worked out some contingency plans, assuming that we would have to close a facility. We would have extra offices of extra people after the disinfection of that building to come in and execute the work, because of course people would be in quarantine.
I have a question for you. Yeah. Oh, yeah,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the question was coming on the business impact, right? So, yeah, please.
I wanted to ask about the chain supply, because of course you're relying a lot on goods, imported goods, the watches and so on. How it comes to the chain supply? I mean, do you receive regularly watches still, or how is the chain supply working?
That's a very good question, Frederic. At the moment, we have no disruption in the chain supply. And I say it's a good question because it's not only the question of the airline coming to Korea, on which we have no problem now, but we have seen in the numbers before that it becomes now also a major crisis in Europe. And then the question will be, are the companies in Europe, the brands, in the capability of maintaining production? We have seen, for example, our competitor Rolex closing some factory for two weeks, right? At the moment in the Swatch Group, we are maintaining production. So there is absolutely no issue with getting product, flying product over, getting them in our warehouse and distributing from the warehouse to the point of sales.
Very good, yeah, thank you.
Right. The issue for us when we look at the sales and the impact on our business, it's twofolded. If we look at the duty-free, at the travelers coming in and buying our products, or the outbound from Koreans flying out and buying it duty-free, this has crashed down. Basically, from a very good month of January, which was in line with the last year's performance, we are down now to a traffic which I would say is around minus 90%. And the sales accordingly at the end of March were will be minus 83%, and we project that they will go down to minus 95% on the duty-free side. Interestingly enough, on the local business, which was very good towards the end of last year and continued to be very solid in January, we see that the drop in traffic and about 20%, and the drop in sales is limited to about 15%. And this is also due to the fact that for some brands, mid-range mostly, we can compensate with online sales. So people, you know, they visit less the shop physically, but they visit the online shop, and we see a huge increase in our online sales. Not to say that we can compensate online sales from the lost offline sales, but at least that's an upside which is relatively positive, and the overall result is actually better than one can expect or could expect. You know, minus 15% is not that dramatic compared to the situation.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Let me share a bit on my side. How things are going.
Yeah.
So Zuellig is doing many different things. We are working in the drug distribution and logistics. We're also doing some clinical trials, and we are also detailing with medical reps visiting the hospitals and the pharmacies. So it's different businesses that having different constraints. So what's been happening is that we've been following the crisis very early because we had also to make sure that we continue our business to provide all the very sensitive drugs to patients which are suffering from chronic disease and they cannot stop the treatment. And so it was fundamental that we would be able to find ways to continue to work and at the same time protect or keep our employees safe, making sure there would be no contamination in warehouses and also in the office. So from very early stages, we decided to put people working from home from the office. A few of them cannot really work. Roger said I'm hard to understand. I'm trying to.
Excuse me if I just. Sorry, Erwan, can I just interrupt you? Apparently, there is an echo, and maybe it's coming from one of someone mic or speaker, and we cannot hear Erwan well.
Yeah, I had some echo as well in my ears.
Okay, it's better, I think.
Okay. So, so I was saying, depending on the directions where we're working or the type of activity we had to make sure our employees would stay safe and we would continue our business to be able to deliver the drugs to the patients. So we decided from various stages to put all the employees from working from home in, office employees, providing laptops to all those who didn't have any laptops. And organizing shifts in the warehouses to make sure that people would not, we would be protected by splitting the teams in two, and also having very strict measures, making sure people from inside the warehouses wouldn't meet the people from outside. And in terms of medical reps, many hospitals impose some very strict measures in terms of visiting the hospitals or clinics. But we kept our people visiting the pharmacies and the clinics and find special procedures to be able to continue to deliver the drugs in the hospitals. We gave extra protection equipments in terms of masks, gloves to the people on the field. and we've been monitoring very closely where the contaminated people were to make sure that we would put in pre-quarantine anybody who had been in potential contacts with one of the contaminated patients. So it's been a bit difficult to manage for the teams, but so far the activity has been continuously working well. We don't see many drops in terms of activity, and the only sector which is probably suffering a bit more is the clinical trials, because we have less patients going to the hospitals. So it was difficult for us to continue that activity as we were doing before. Okay, so I think people can start.
Yep.
Yes, go ahead.
When it comes to your industry, of course, they are in front of the situation. I mean, you are in pharma. When it comes to numbers, I mean, how did you see your company growth this year, and what are your expectations for 2020?
So January was a pretty positive. I think the doctors started to give some bigger prescriptions, and so we've seen a slowdown in the traffic in the pharmacies, but people coming with bigger prescriptions, so numbers were quite positive. In February, it dropped down. In March, it's accelerating again, so people are still coming back to buy their treatments. What you have is a big shift in terms of type of product, which consumes all the chronic disease or what you call ETC, ethical drugs, are still very high. The non-essential drugs in aesthetics, in OTC, for example, are dropping in our portfolio. So we see a shift in terms of what people are consuming.
I see. Okay. Also, being in the pharma industry, have you heard of any trials here in Korea when it comes to a cure or to a vaccine? Have you? I mean, what people in the industry are saying? Do you have any?
So there's a strong collaboration between all the big pharma companies to try to see how we can speed up the recovery with some vaccines. I think there are 56 treatments which are being investigated right now. There's been some remarkable collaboration as well with all the governments around the world to really fast-pace the treatment clinical trials. But for sure, I mean, even if we have some results in a couple of months on the patients, time to produce the vaccines and supply that, we know that we're not going to be able to treat the whole work population in a very short time period. We're also monitoring very closely, as Alain was explaining, the potential disruption in the supply chain. We're quite worried by the fact that situation is getting worse now in the United States and Europe. We had a few orange lights, no red lights yet, and obviously we haven't defined all the critical drugs to make sure that those where we don't have any generics or very unique drugs, but we have sufficient safety stocks to make sure that people can still get access to these drugs. Just one other point I didn't mention: we have 360 employees working in the Daegu area, which was a bit more difficult for them, obviously, because they were in the epicenter of the disease. And just to mention that so far we didn't get any case in the company. Everybody was kept safe.
Okay, that's good. That's good to know.
So long term, just to repeat your question, and then we can hear from the author. Still have the echo. Yeah. So long term, it's difficult to see what's going to happen. I think we've seen now how people are getting back. With March numbers going up again, I think people are going back to taking a normal consumption in terms of drugs. In terms of healthcare, people would still need to cure themselves. But definitely what we see as well is probably a change, a shift in the way people are consuming, and that is something that's going probably to last, with maybe people going less to hospitals, going more to clinics, which would be an interesting shift, or people trying to get bigger prescription from the doctors, and trying to get access to online services more than what they were doing before. And actually, one of the things we're trying to push is trying to change some part of the regulation, because Korea is still a bit behind a couple of things like telemedicine, for example, that could evolve rapidly, looking at the learnings we had from the current crisis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you very much.
Maybe we can hear from Sean in terms of impact in the business, and short-term and long-term.
Let me just unmute. Yeah, so current impact, you know, one of the impact we had was through February. We had 6 weeks of no deliveries from our factories in China, so that really that impacted us for sure in February, to an extent in March. But the supply chain is reopened, and the products are moving again without issues at the moment. So what we do see in our industry is 3 types of segments. One is the new installations. So projects are continuing, and we are seeing an uptick in some of the construction, small projects and large projects that are coming forward. In our service business, this is regular monthly business for us, so that's more or less stable, with the exception of limited access to some buildings closed for temporary period of disinfection. But again, the relatively small percentage for the total number of buildings in our portfolio. And then we have short-term, short-cycle work, which is called repair work. So this could be as a result of a breakdown or an upgrade or a small addition to the elevator. This business has taken an impact, more or less impacting now in March. And I think that's been just a trend with limited access to some of the buildings, especially for our retail customers. Some of them, you know, closing for a period of time, and this is limiting our access. So, you know, the economy, I think it was talked about globally going into a hard stop. I think for construction-related business, this is more of a long-cycle business. So, you know, the momentum of that business carries forward, and I think we'll see possible slowdowns in the future, but this is still not clear. I think in terms of the operation, now we have fewer meetings, a lot more webinars like this. I think you know, one challenge we're seeing at the moment is training. So bringing people and developing their skills. This has also been somewhat of a challenge for us. We did a lot of class-based training, so we're moving now towards learning management systems which are online, and this self-learning tools, you know, web-based tools. So that's been a rapid implementation there. I think there's some policy in terms of self-isolation. So I think you mentioned, Erwan, people working in the Daegu high-risk areas. So we also have teams in there. And we've also had a couple of buildings designated as COVID influenza clinics. So for these type premises, we're still required to service, and we do so with great care. So we apply full hazmat suits, boots and face masks, eye goggles, etc. So there are some quite significant precautions being taken on those high-risk areas. And as you mentioned, we also have no infected employees to date. So it seems to be working so far, but the challenges still remain.
Thank you. Mr. Kang in Givaudan, how is it going in terms of business? You mentioned briefly that there was no impact on your business so far. Do you see any further impact in the next months?
Yes, the business itself in Givaudan, Korea is pretty okay. So as you can imagine, the FMCG business is sharply increased the first quarter during the situation. So, but particularly based on that the segment, such as beverage, and instant noodle, and snacking, and the frozen foods, those are really sharply increased, double-digit growth. So I'm expecting about high single-digit growth in first quarter. But second quarter is pretty wondering how this is going go through. The particularly beverage and ice cream, those are really a big impact. The people has to be spent outside activity, but those are will negatively impact from the Q2. So how the Korea quickly to overcome the situation, this business will be will be returned. So business itself is pretty okay now. Our higher priority is logistic things. So actually the goods from the China is quite normalized, but the issue is from the Europe and from the US. Actually, in Givaudan factory operation is any issue to produce, but the problem is the delivery from the good to the overseas. Also, the very high cost, the air charge and the ocean charge is 2-3 times the expense than the before. So this is most critical and challenging us.
Interesting. Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Kong. We just received also a question from Gordon Dudley. So anyone can take this question and answer. The question is, once mandated restriction on quarantine isolation are removed, do you expect remote working or non-office based work to continue at a much higher level than before on a permanent basis? What implication do you see if that's the case?
Maybe I can give an answer from Zuellig. It's quite interesting actually, because we renovated totally the office in January. So we had started to get people working from home just because we're trying to get people, because we're renovating the office. And when the crisis started, then most of the people stayed at home. Now, what we're trying to do with the new office is to get a place where people can use the office as a collaborative working space, but allowing more flexibility in the way people are working. And although I thought you would need some time to get people to change the way they're working, the crisis forced us to work in a very different way. So I'm expecting after the crisis to keep some flexibility in terms of being able to get people to work from home or work in an office in a very different way from what we had before. So less formal desk, but more collaborative rooms to get people to be able to work together.
Interesting. Yeah.
This is Alain. Maybe I can add a comment, Erwan and Frederic, to this interesting question. Because what we realize here when we turn to a home office, first, everybody is somehow enthusiastic because you think first about security, of course, and being more isolated, doing your home work, right? And then we realized that people were coming back to the office because we maintained the opening with the shift. And the staff coming back was actually saying, well, it's more practical for me to come. I know it's a little bit risky maybe to go in the public transportation and I expose myself, but in another way, it's so much more efficient to do my work in the office place than to do it from home. So think about rapidity of SAP or other software that you use, which are not so accessible from the home compared to the office environment. Another thing which was mentioned is that the person say, you know, it's very difficult for me to work from home because at home I have my kids around, I have my family. Basically, the TV is going on the whole day, and I cannot concentrate on what I'm doing. I think we can learn from this experience, and certainly we can think about offering some home office time, but certainly it will not be in our industry dramatically so that we will move to that. Also, I realized that the communication is very important. So here we have many brands in our company. It's not a mono-brand company or a mono-activity company. So we have many brands at different levels. And these brands, these teams, they need to coordinate between sales, between marketing activities. They need to work together with what we call service divisions, logistics, etc. And this is very difficult to achieve over a Skype conference call. Not to talk about the differences in languages, which is much easier to deal with when you see actually the people. So I think, yes, we will learn from that. We will improve certainly some facility. We'll be ready or better ready for a new potential problem. But I think this is not applicable throughout in our organization.
All right. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah, very typical business. It's not easy, definitely, to bring everyone together. We have another question from Roger. Roger's been done. Welcome, Roger, and thank you for your question. The question is, what was the impact on your communication with your HQ? Did you implement new tools such as video platform, Zoom, etc.? Did you have any difficulties due to a much higher increase of internet traffic? Thank you for the question. Who wants to take this question?
I can give us a quick word on that. I was talking about the many brands we have, right, and the many HQs we have then in consequence. And I believe that the communication with the brand headquarters actually was mostly done per phone or per video conference or with Skype tools, right? And I don't think that this is a problem. The problem is more for the brand people to come in the market, or reversely for the market to go to the brand to get information about product, about strategy. And I think this is very difficult to replace on the phone, you know. So with the travel ban or the travel restriction that we experience, I think this is creating maybe not short term, but longer term some difficulties. So I hope that we can get back to normal there, because for us it's very important to exchange closely between the brand and the brand headquarter, and the brand headquarter to know the market or understand the market. So I think this is it can work out for a small period of time, but mid-term, long-term, that's no good.
Yeah, I mean, you have much less brand manager on the market visiting stores and so on, right?
That we keep, because most of so we don't see really a problem, or we don't face a problem circulating in Seoul. No, I was more referring to the international traveling, you know, from the VP sales or from the VP marketing coming to the market. Of course, all of this is suspended now.
All right.
And we don't travel to Switzerland either.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, on our side, I think, Alain, if you want to put on mute. Second here, thank you. On our side, no specific issue, and the headquarters have been very early trying to monitor the crisis at the regional level, and also dispatching masks, because very quickly we were shipping masks. At the beginning of the crisis, actually, Korea, we were shipping masks to Thailand and Hong Kong, and very quickly then we had to receive masks now from Indonesia and other countries until the different governments became very strict in allowing masks to circulate in the region. And also we try to get learnings from other countries. The most difficult cases in the past days have been Malaysia and Philippines, where the governments imposed some very strict lockdowns in terms of movements of the population, which had some impact on our sides with circulation of the drugs. Apart from that, no big differences in terms of communication with headquarters, no slowdown of the internet. The main issue is yes, less visits from some experts that had to come from the different countries, or people we had to send to other countries outside that was restricted. But apart from that, no significant impact.
No, I think we're in a similar position as well. We had a kind of well-established communications with the zone and the group back in Switzerland for many months, but I think it's fair to say that some of these other countries in the headquarter are now facing what we were some months ago, and so they're early in this cycle, and while we seem to be stabilizing, as Erwan put it before, with the number of cases, of course, situation's quite different there. So we're finding issues more around responsiveness from the headquarter, being more preoccupied with what's happening locally, which is understandable.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. We have another question from Michel Martinez from Lotte Nestlé. He's asking, we have been supplying masks to our employees with clear priority to employees on the field, but mask sourcing has been a challenge. How did you manage the source of masks?
So on my side, on Zuellig side, as I was mentioning, it was extremely difficult to source masks locally. So we imported a lot of masks from different countries in the region, from affiliates. Actually, Indonesia is distributing masks, so we've been doing that from Indonesia until the recent days, where we had 60,000 masks that had to be sent to us, and they were blocked in the port by the government that decided to stop the exports of masks. We are now distributing masks as Zuellig in Daegu, but the minute you put masks in the market, they disappear very quickly. We also developed an application that is called My Pharmacy that we are distributing to the pharmacies, that allows patients and pharmacies to communicate and show the stocks of masks in all the pharmacies. But definitely it remains under very high tension.
Right, thank you very much.
Just one information from our side. Sourcing of mask, we were actually pretty successful with sourcing out of China. It seems that China has now big capacity on production again, and we could source up to 100,000 masks. Now, the issue is that the problem is that these mask imports are regulated by the Korean government, and it's quite difficult to get them over the border. One thing makes it easier if these masks are shipped free of charge. So if you work with an intercompany and you accept to leave the cost in China, for example, and then move them in Korea and you make them free of charge, then it should facilitate the importation in Korea.
Thank you very much.
Great. Maybe because we're coming to an end, one live question for the other panelists to understand if you see in the era after the crisis things you would do differently in terms of doing your business. As an example, in Zuellig, we've been working with the teams now to implement some digital solutions to do some e-detailing to reach the doctors and the pharmacists. We've been accelerating with some work we do with a couple of startups where we took some shares, which are proposing some social platforms to get the doctors to talk about their cases together. We're also developing one from the pharmacists. And so definitely, I think we will see an acceleration in terms of digital in the way we detail, sell, collect the products. And I'd be interested to see if you've been already thinking about these changes, or if you will adapt the way you do business in the near future.
That's a good point, Erwan. And also, I think from our side, we're going fully digital. So implementing apps for our service business, enabling them to work much more independently and paperless as well. So eliminating need to come back into the office. I think this is really something we're fast tracking through the organization at the moment. And I think for our customers as well, giving them portals, opportunity to look at their data over the web and look at the performance of their equipment real time across the web. So this is some of the infrastructure we're also implementing at the moment. We'll see that come to the market here in the next 1 or 2 months. I think from an operational perspective too, you know, this disaster recovery and planning is always front of mind for management. That they're staying across best practice in terms of crisis management, in terms of communications to employees and how that's run. You know, we find that just an email, for example, it takes 2 weeks for some of our field personnel to read email. It only takes a couple of minutes for SMS. So we very much use, you know, adapting our communications across tools that get the message out quickly. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I would like to check with everyone. Do you have any other questions?